Brittany's heartbreaking breakdown while Chris Combs fights for life after suffering a stroke is the tragedy of the 1,000-pound sisters. Hi everyone, this is Jennifer from 90 Day Insider, and I'm excited to be back with another amazing video. Don't miss the drama, behind-the-scenes stories, and the latest updates. Let's get started. The devastating news that Chris Combs, Amy and Tammy Slaton's beloved brother, was taken to the hospital after suffering a massive stroke has rocked the 1000 LB Sisters fandom to its core. Chris has been one of the show's most stable, dependable, and consoling characters for years, bringing stability when chaos threatened to overwhelm the Slaton family. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, the person who has always been there to support everyone else is the one in dire need of support himself. The nightmare started like any other day when Chris complained of feeling unusually tired. At first, Brittany wasn't worried because Chris had been under stress, balancing his health journey with the responsibilities of family life, so it wasn't unusual for him to feel drained. However, something frightening happened when his words began to slur. He tried to reassure her that he was fine, but within minutes his right arm went weak and he collapsed onto the floor. Brittany realized right away that this was no ordinary health scare, and she screamed for help and dialed 911 in a panic, pleading for the emergency responders to come as soon as possible. Amy, who has always had a particularly close bond with Chris, broke down the moment she heard the word stroke. According to family insiders, Amy was inconsolable, sobbing uncontrollably as she tried to process the terrifying reality that her brother's life was hanging in the balance. Paramedics rushed Chris into the ambulance and sped to the nearest hospital, fighting against the clock. Strokes are deadly, and every second matters. By the time the family was contacted, emotions were already running high. Brittany, on the other hand, remained by Chris's side the entire time. At the hospital, she reportedly held his hand and cried as she whispered, "Please don't leave us, Chris. You're our rock. You're my everything." Witnesses describe it as one of the most heartbreaking scenes they have ever witnessed. A woman clinging to her beloved while knowing that his life could end at any time. Tammy, who has frequently had a complicated relationship with her siblings, was reportedly in stunned silence, too shocked to even cry at first, but visibly shaken as the weight of the situation hit her. Doctors worked urgently, performing scans and emergency procedures to prevent further damage from the stroke, but as medical teams rushed around him, the family could only wait, cry, and pray. Amy was so overcome with emotion that she reportedly collapsed into the arms of relatives when she saw Chris being wheeled into the intensive care unit. Fans quickly took to social media to express their love and support for Chris after learning of his stroke, creating hashtags like #PrayForChris and #StayStrongCombs. Those who had watched Chris fight for his health and support his sisters during their darkest moments were now pleading for a miracle, with many writing that they could not imagine the show or the Slaton family without Chris's humor, wisdom, and steady presence. But even in the darkest of times, fans, family, and friends are holding fast to the fact that Chris Combs has always been a fighter, and now everyone is hoping that he still has the strength to survive this terrifying ordeal. This tragedy feels like yet another unforgiving blow to the Slaton family, who have already had to deal with scandals, heartbreak, and public criticism. For Amy and Brittany, the sterile white walls felt like a prison every second stretched into eternity as they waited for updates from doctors. What should have been an ordinary day had become the most terrifying night of their lives, a nightmare from which neither of them could wake. The sound of hurried footsteps, muffled cries, and the constant beeping of machines filled the hospital corridors as Chris Combs battled for his life. At the ER entrance, Brittany was still holding Chris's hand when the ambulance doors opened, refusing to let go even as paramedics yelled commands and wheeled him inside. She staggered alongside the gurney, tears running down her cheeks, whispering, "I'm here, I'm right here." It seemed as though she believed her voice could hold him to life, prevent him from slipping away. Nurses tried to gently pull her back so they could tend to Chris, but Brittany resisted, desperate not to be parted from the man she loved. When Amy finally arrived, her face was already red and swollen from crying, and she rushed into the waiting room, clutching her chest and gasping for air. According to family members, she nearly fell to the ground when she saw Chris for the first time through the swinging ICU doors, screaming, "That's my brother! That's my brother!" and reaching for him with her arms. Staff had to lead her to a chair as she sobbed uncontrollably, repeatedly saying, "Please don't take him. Please don't take him from us." There was a tense atmosphere, every movement precise and urgent. Every command barked sharply as they fought to stabilize Chris, the voices of the medical staff clashing with the sounds of machines, a chaotic symphony of life or death urgency. Doctors and nurses were working feverishly inside the intensive care unit, ICU. Chris's condition was critical, and every minute that passed increased the risk of permanent damage. "She didn't even know what to do with herself," one family friend said. "It's like she was frozen in place, just broken." Tammy, who had arrived in shock shortly after Amy, was eerily quiet for someone who is usually known for her loud personality and sharp words. She simply stared at the floor, her hands shaking, her face pale. Eventually, Tammy broke down in tears, whispering to herself, "I can't lose him. I can't." Refusing to leave the waiting area outside the intensive care unit, Brittany clung to her phone with trembling hands. At one point, it was reported that she dropped it as her legs gave way under her. Despite the comforting words of friends and family, she screamed, "He's my world! He's my everything! He can't die! He just can't!" The intensity of her grief filled the room, and even hospital strangers had to wipe away their own tears. Hours passed, each one more burdensome than the last, and the doctors came and went, giving cautious updates but never the reassurance the family sorely needed. Amy and Brittany would jump up and down at the first word of a doctor's arrival, hoping for a bright future. But the news was grim. Chris had had a massive stroke, and the next 48 hours would determine whether he survived. While this was going on, fans all over the world were following every tidbit of information they could find online. Thousands of posts were made on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, with one fan writing, "I'm literally crying right now. Chris has always been my favorite. Please, God, don't let this be the end." Another fan wrote, "If Chris doesn't make it, the whole Slaton family will fall apart. He's their glue." The hashtag #PrayForChris started trending across various platforms, bringing fans together in shared sorrow and hope. He was supposed to be the strong one, the one who survived, but here he was, hooked up to machines, fighting for his life in front of the people who loved him the most. The cruel irony of this situation was what made it even more intolerable. Chris had spent years fighting for better health, undergoing surgery, making lifestyle changes, and helping his sisters through their own hardships. And as night turned to morning, Amy and Brittany stayed by Chris's side, their eyes swollen from crying, their voices hoarse from prayers and desperate whispers. The family had been through scandals, divorces, health scares, and countless public battles, but nothing compared to this. This was life and death, and in that moment, all they could do was hold on to hope that Chris Combs would find the strength to keep fighting. The hospital room, the terrors, the chaos, all of it felt like a scene that no one ever wanted to see. Amy and Brittany collapsed emotionally outside the hospital, their pain so raw that even strangers walking through the halls stopped to stare, while Chris Combs sat helplessly in the waiting area, the sterile air of the hospital seeming heavy, almost suffocating. Seeing her strong, humorous brother lying helplessly in a hospital bed left Amy devastated. Witnesses remember her clutching her stomach, rocking back and forth in the waiting room chair, repeating through sobs, "I can't lose him. I can't lose my brother. He's always been there for me. What am I supposed to do without him?" Amy had always relied on Chris, who for years had been her biggest supporter, the sibling who stepped in when things with Tammy spiraled out of control, the one who gave her advice when she doubted herself, and the one who encouraged her on her weight loss journey. Inconsolable, with her face buried in her hands and tears streaming out of her eyes, she pleaded with God to spare her brother, saying, "Why him? Why now? He doesn't deserve this." Her voice cracked with grief as her breakdown became so severe that staff thought about calling in a counselor to help her stabilize. Brittany's collapse was equally devastating, but different. While Amy's grief was clearly audible, Brittany's grief came in waves of panic and desperation, and she refused to leave the intensive care unit doors, even when nurses told her to rest. She stood there, trembling, her hands clasped tightly as if in prayer, and at one point, she sank to her knees in the hallway, sobbing so hard that she was barely breathing. Family members attempted to help her to her feet, but she shook them off, crying, Don't tell me to calm down. The love of my life is in there, and I don't know if he's coming back to me." The room went quiet as she screamed, "Chris, please fight. Please don't leave me." The scream was so filled with pain that even the most experienced hospital staff were shaken. Brittany felt helpless as the man who had been her partner, her anchor, and her safe haven in the world began to disappear. Unlike her usual outspoken and confrontational sister, Tammy was unusually quiet. She sat in the corner, her eyes glassy, her face pale, and at first she didn't even cry, just staring into space as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. However, after a while, she started to cry, first silently and then whispering, "He doesn't deserve this. He was supposed to be okay. He was supposed to outlive us all." For a family so accustomed to tumult and loud emotions, the difference in their reactions produced a tragic picture. Each was falling apart in their own manner, yet they were all united in their fear of losing Chris. Tammy's stillness was nearly as heartbreaking as Amy and Brittany's shouts. Meanwhile, the 1000 LB Sisters fandom was in a frenzy outside the hospital, with social media exploding with rumors, anxiety, and prayers. With thousands of posts coming in every hour, fans posted pictures of Chris from the show with heartfelt captions like, "You were always the heart of the family. Please hang on, Chris." Others wrote about their own loved ones who had survived strokes, offering words of encouragement and hope. The following was a popular fan tweet. "I've seen this family go through hell and back, but this is the most heartbreaking thing yet." Chris is the glue that holds the Slaton family together. Without him, everything falls apart. TLC, please give us updates. TikTok users started sharing heartfelt compilations of Chris's greatest moments on the show, with captions like, "Stay strong, Chris," and "Don't give up." The fan community, which was typically split over the family's drama and scandals, united in support of the man everyone believed to be the show's true heart. Hashtags like #prayers for Chris Combs, #SlatonStrong, and #1000 LBA Sisters. Family swiftly took over Twitter and Instagram. A fellow TLC personality wrote, "Sending love and prayers to Chris and his family tonight. He's always been one of the good ones." Former cast members of other shows responded with encouraging remarks, reminding everyone how much Chris was adored by both fans and colleagues in the reality TV industry. Even celebrities and reality TV stars started to weigh in. But the love also brought fear, and rumors started to circulate quickly. Some fans thought the TLC was hiding information to create drama for the show, while others were afraid that the worst had already happened and the family wasn't prepared to share the news with the public. The silence from official sources only made the situation worse. All of the fans wanted answers, but the doctors were the only ones who had them, and their statements were too ambiguous to be of any real consolation. As the ICU's machines beeped steadily, nurses whispered to one another, and the family clung to each other in the hallway. The reality is, the next 48 hours would determine everything. For Amy, Brittany, and Tammy, the weight of fan attention didn't matter at that moment. All that mattered was Chris's struggle for survival. Or would this be the moment that permanently shattered the Slaton family? Would Chris Combs, the resilient brother, the loyal husband, and the fighter who had always encouraged his family to keep going, survive this awful turn of events? The waiting room was still crowded with the shattered remnants of the Slaton Combs family as night fell over the Kentucky hospital, and no one could bring themselves to leave. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the vending machines in the corner remained unattended, and the only sound that mattered was the constant beep, beep, beep of the machines inside Chris's intensive care unit room. That sound, so clinical, so mechanical, was the thin thread holding him to life. The neurologist explained in measured, careful words that the next 48 hours were crucial. "We are doing everything we can," the doctor said, "but there are no guarantees. His body has to fight, and we'll support him with every tool we have." Earlier in the evening, doctors had given a terrifying update. Chris had suffered a severe stroke, and the damage was significant. Although they had managed to restore partial blood flow, the swelling in his brain was still dangerously high. Amy clung to every word, nodding through her tears as if her desperate hope alone could change the outcome, while Brittany collapsed again, sobbing so hard she couldn't catch her breath. "I can't lose him," she repeated over and over, gripping her chest as if her heart itself were shattering. The family listened in silence, their faces pale, their eyes red from hours of crying. With her head down and her hands clasped tightly in her lap, Tammy remained eerily silent. At one point she whispered, almost to herself, "He was supposed to outlive all of us. He was the strong one." Her words shattered the room like glass, and for once Tammy wasn't defensive or angry, she was just broken, faced with the terrifying possibility that her brother, who always picked her up when she fell, might not return. While Brittany refused to even close her eyes, Amy curled up in a blanket, her face still streaked with tears, and Tammy sat silently in her wheelchair, her eyes glazed, her thoughts hidden but her pain obvious. The family decided they would not leave the hospital, and they set up an all-night vigil in the waiting room, sleeping on uncomfortable plastic chairs and taking turns peeking into the intensive care unit when nurses permitted it. The storm outside the hospital grew louder as the hours passed, and news outlets started to cover the tragedy. Websites flashed headlines. Chris Combs, star of the 1000 lb Sisters, is critically ill following a stroke. Amid a devastating health crisis, the Slaton family was rushed to the hospital. Fans offer up prayers as Chris Combs battles for life in the ICU. TLC issued a brief statement, acknowledging that Chris had experienced a medical emergency, but asking fans to respect the family's privacy. Despite this, the demand for updates only increased, with fans worldwide refreshing their feeds every few minutes in a desperate attempt to get a glimpse of the family. A Facebook fan group dedicated to the family organized a live prayer circle where hundreds of people joined virtually, lighting candles and bowing their heads in unison. Thousands of fans shared their own personal stories of loved ones who had survived strokes, giving Brittany and Amy hope. Others shared videos of Chris's most endearing and humorous moments from the show, reminding everyone why he was so adored. A contentious online debate ensued. Was reality TV to blame for the stress that might have contributed to Chris's condition? Or was this just a cruel twist of fate that no one could have stopped? The love was accompanied by speculation and controversy, with some fans accusing TLC of taking advantage of the tragedy for ratings, and others accusing the network of pressuring the family too much in their personal struggles. But inside the hospital, all that mattered was Chris. During short visits, Brittany would whisper to him, "You have to come back to me. The kids need you. I need you. Please, baby, don't give up now." Amy, when she was permitted inside, would lean over his bed and weep, holding his hand tightly, whispering, "You're my big brother. You can't leave me. Not like this." Tammy, who was less talkative, was frequently seen wiping her face with tissues while her shoulders trembled in silent grief. Even though the night lasted into the morning and fatigue started to set in, none of them could stand to go because every moment felt risky, and nobody wanted to be away in case the unimaginable occurred. The world watched and waited, holding its breath for the next update in a tragedy that had already won over millions of hearts, while the family stayed there as the first rays of morning came through the hospital windows, broken, scared, but united in their love for Chris. Would the Slaton family wake up to the news they feared most, or would Chris survive the crucial 48 hours?